All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a chapter that covers the complex, often frustrating, but absolutely vital world of international organizations. If you've ever looked at global politics and thought, why do we even have these massive global bodies? Or what do they actually get done? Well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to explore the core concepts from the text, breaking down the history, the really harsh criticisms, and the undeniable necessity of our global system. So let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat, the intense public frustration over the United Nations' inability to just stop violence. There's a lot of strong sentiment out there about the UN's effectiveness. Take the 2006 Lebanon crisis, for example. You had massive civilian casualties and destroyed infrastructure, but the UN didn't manage to pass a resolution until August of that year. That kind of delay creates this profound feeling of ineffectiveness, like the UN is just hiding behind a shield of words while real weapons are flying, ultimately just leaving behind a broken emblem in a war zone. And recognizing those failures naturally leads us to a really fair question. If these institutions so often fail to stop actual conflict, why do we even need a global talking shop? I mean, it's a super common critique that the UN is basically just a parliament of endless speeches and bureaucratic red tape. So what is the actual point?
To answer that, here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to quickly cover why we have international organizations, the evolution of the UN, post-Cold War challenges, Security Council reform, and finally, tackling global interdependence. Section 1. Why international organizations? Let's figure out the actual purpose behind all this.
To kind of reset our expectations, there's this incredible quote from Dag Hammarskjöld, the UN's second Secretary General. He said, "The United Nations was not created to take humanity to heaven, but to save it from hell." I think that just perfectly captures the incredibly high stakes involved here. The UN isn't there to create some flawless global utopia. It's a deeply pragmatic tool designed for basic human survival.
Building on that, Shashi Tharoor, a former UN Under-Secretary General, had a super practical take. Drawing on a famous Winston Churchill sentiment, he points out that, yeah, there are a ton of speeches and meetings. It absolutely is a talking shop. But as he puts it, jaw is better than war. He asks us to consider, isn't it significantly better to have one place where countries can get together and bore each other with words rather than bore holes into each other on a battlefield?
Section 2. Evolution of the UN. Let's look at how this whole thing started.
Because the UN didn't just appear out of thin air. It was literally born from the ashes of two unprecedented global catastrophes. The sheer devastation of the First World War pushed the world to invest in a conflict resolution organization, which led to the birth of the League of Nations in 1919. But of course, the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 tragically proved the League had failed. And the cost of that failure? Millions of lives. So immediately following World War II in 1945, the UN was founded as a much stronger successor to the League. The world learned the hard way that a robust mechanism for conflict resolution was absolutely non-negotiable.
Section 3. Post-Cold War challenges. The world shifted, and the UN had to keep up. Think about how drastically the world changed around 1989, at the end of the Cold War. It was an era of unprecedented shifts. The Soviet Union completely collapsed. Asian economies started growing at lightning speed. A huge influx of newly independent countries joined the UN, which completely altered its makeup. And crucially, we saw the rise of totally new complex threats. Stuff like climate change, environmental degradation, massive epidemics, and non-state terrorism. So the big question became, is a UN framework that was built in 1945 to stop traditional wars actually equipped to handle these brand new realities?
Which brings us to Section 4, reforming the Security Council. This is where a lot of the tension lies.
To really understand the massive push for reform, we have to look back at a 1992 UN General Assembly resolution. Member states were fed up, and they voiced some very loud, very clear complaints about the Security Council. First, they argued it no longer represents contemporary political realities. Second, they felt its decisions only reflect Western values and interests, entirely dominated by just a few powerful nations. And third, they pointed out a severe lack of equitable representation for the developing world. Basically, the power structure of the UN just doesn't match the globe as it actually exists today.
But here's the catch. Fixing it is a massive logistical nightmare. Figuring out how to actually reallocate power fairly is incredibly complicated. I mean, how do you do it? Do you divide representation based on levels of economic development? Or do you try to balance it across different civilizations and cultural streams? And if you go with culture, how on earth do you divide the world that way, knowing that most countries have countless different cultural streams right within their own borders? It is a giant puzzle with absolutely no easy answers.
Finally, Section 5, Tackling Global Interdependence, Why We Are Fundamentally Stuck with Each Other.
To really grasp the scale of the inequality we're dealing with on the global stage, just look at another major international organization, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. Out of 190 member countries, just the G7 members, so that's the US, Japan, Germany, France, the UK, Italy, and Canada, those 7 countries alone hold over 41% of the voting power. That leaves the other 183 members scrambling to split the remaining 58%. It is a crazy, stark reminder of just how unequally global power is still concentrated today.
And, we always have to remember that behind all these bureaucratic debates over voting shares and Security Council seats, we're talking about real human lives. When we look at crises like the atrocities in Darfur, we are reminded of the UN's ongoing, agonizing struggle to effectively protect people. When national governments fail their own citizens, what exactly is the responsibility of the international community? Is a big helping of words really enough when faced with starvation or genocide? This is the incredibly heavy reality the institution wrestles with daily.
Still, despite all those totally valid, heartbreaking criticisms, the UN isn't just sitting idle. A quick look at current UN peacekeeping operations worldwide shows that, despite the flaws and the endless red tape, the UN has boots on the ground right now. Across the globe, from Mali to Lebanon to Kosovo, they are actively deployed, trying their hardest to maintain stability in some of the most fragile regions on Earth.
So if you take one thing away from this explainer, let it be this. Our modern world is entirely defined by interdependence. Shared threats like global warming, rising sea levels, and sweeping diseases, they care absolutely nothing for national borders. There is no single country, no matter how wealthy or powerful they are, that can solve these issues alone. Absolute global cooperation isn't just some nice, fluffy diplomatic ideal anymore. It's literally a functional necessity for our survival.
Which leaves us with a pretty massive question to chew on. As technology continues to increase our planetary interdependence, the role of these international organizations is only going to get bigger. With more than 7 billion people sharing this deeply connected, highly volatile planet, the real question isn't whether the UN is flawed. We already know it is. The real question is, can we possibly afford to live without it? Think about that as you keep exploring the chapter. Thanks for joining me today.